It's a new podcast. My name is Ben, your host, and today we have Mr. Michael Sanders, a dude who is doing so many different things all at once, completely changing the game. I cannot wait to chat with you, Michael. It is such a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben, and hello, everyone.
Hell yeah. All right, we're going to dive into the show, but first, let's level up.
Take it to the next level. Take it to the next level.
All right, now that we are absolutely fired up and ready to rock, Michael, I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. You're doing so many different things, so I just kind of want to start off by understanding your story. How did you really get to this point, and where are you?
I was muted there. So yeah, Ben, I started my crypto journey back in 2010 when I was first exposed to Bitcoin as this, decentralized money. And honestly, within 10 seconds, I thought this is the future. And then I had the fortune of meeting Vitalik Buterin, the inventor of Ethereum, in January 2014. So, about a year before Ethereum's actual launch. And I was convinced at that time, and I still am, that Vitalik is from the future and he's here to teach us about technology, economics, and love. And that's when I fell in love with the Web3 ecosystem. Not that we were calling it Web3 back then, but this next generation of the internet with these new kinds of applications where users and creators could share in the value of the networks they participate in. And since that time, I really fell in love with the Ethereum ecosystem, and I spent years trying to think about how can we actually usher in these technologies in a really fun and loving way to benefit as many people and entities as possible. And I didn't have really any great ideas, at least not any that came to fruition. But then I met Peter Kieltika, our CEO and co-founder at Horizon, who, to my knowledge, in the middle of 2017, was the first person to conceptualize blockchain games. And within 5 minutes of him telling me, I was like, holy shit, this is it. This is how we can welcome the world to these incredible technologies and get people using them and getting them to understand them in a really fun way without needing to do massive amounts of research and education. Just do it through fun experiences. And so, yeah, we co-founded Horizon shortly thereafter, and that was end of 2017. So I guess honestly, almost approaching 5 years now, and it's been an absolutely incredible journey.
Well, I'm so glad that you've been around for so long. You've seen the different innovations in the space, and you came to the conclusion that blockchain gaming, Web3 gaming, that's the path. Obviously, I'm super bullish on that myself, for clearly biased, creating the Crypto Gaming Institute. But I'm just curious, because you went through so many different iterations of crypto, and you've seen so much being as a function of being in the space. What about blockchain gaming was that aha moment, or what about it really triggered that aha moment where you're like, yes, this is the thing?
The fact that you could understand and experience Web3 and crypto through play. I think humans love to play, we're all seeking fun experiences and novel experiences. And this was a way that, people could just do it in an enjoyable manner. Whereas previously, I was sharing 6-page Google Docs with 15 links on them to books and even longer articles to my friends, trying to explain to them the value proposition of cryptocurrency. And most people just don't care, or they're not willing to do that research because it's not that entertaining. So when Peter said, let's make games, and then explain to me digital ownership through tokens registered on the blockchain, I'm like, oh man, this is perfect. And the fact that there already was all of this existing behavior of people spending, $50 to $100 billion per year on video game items, but it's now we can actually empower them to truly own those digital items. So it's just man, the moment he said it to me, I was like, oh, how did no one think of this before?
I love that. And so at that point, it seems like you then created Horizon, and that was really the foundational, or your foundational entryway into the blockchain game space. Can you just kind of talk through what is it, how does it work, and yeah, what's happened since you then started it? What's been the evolution of Horizon?
Yeah, so we founded Horizon right at the end of 2017 and really got to work at the kitchen table in January 2018. And there are five co-founders. So Peter, Ian, our head of operations, Will, our chief scientist, and Daniel, our chief designer. And right from the beginning, we've talked about this new dimension. Like, it's another layer to reality where physical and digital worlds collide, and we want to make this new dimension as fun, accessible, and as beneficial to all participants as possible. So we really set out on a mission to drive Web3 adoption by making Web3 easy, fun, and powerful for users and builders. And we started with the thesis really that, like, everyone will be a Web3 participant within the decade. Perhaps from this point, back then it was kind of like everyone will be a Web3 participant in like 10 to 15 years, And but what's really like holding back adoption is that, one, there's not enough great content that resonates with mainstream audiences. And two, because building Web3 applications is very hard, slow, and complex. And then three, even if you do build a great Web3 application, you're still left with all of the friction around the wallet, which is the onboarding to Web3, right? So at Horizon, we're solving all of these shortcomings to really like enable exponential mainstream adoption and to enable builders. And what that looks like is we started with Skyweaver, a free-to-play Web3 trading card game. Has a really awesome game design and economy. It's very much a game-first game. We can go into more detail about that. Most of our players are actually like have no Web3 experience at all. They're coming to it to simply have a fun video game experience. And then as we were building Skyweaver, in order to enable this seamless experience, because our goal was really to build something that anyone could enjoy, like you didn't need to be Web3 native to play it. So in order to enable that seamless experience, we encountered a ton of pain points along the way, right? And we knew we would. So we knew we were going to have to solve all of this blockchain infrastructure and architecture. And so we did that, and the solutions we created, we productized them and turned them into this full developer stack, a developer platform for building Web3 games and applications. And that's called Sequence. And then I mentioned, the wallet component as well. Well, every Web3 application needs a wallet to onboard its users, and every Web3 user needs a wallet, right? So we built the Sequence Smart Wallet as part of that entire stack. And the Sequence wallet really makes Web3 easy, fun, and secure for anyone. Super seamless onboarding in a non-custodial and multi-key security way. And I'm happy to dive into more details about that. And like, furthermore, I know this is a lot already, but like, and by the way, it's all my team doing it. Like I'm just like chief storyteller and marketing. Like I don't build any of this stuff, so I'm just mesmerized by like the ingenuity and the brilliance of everyone on our team. But we also created Nifty Swap, so it's a protocol. The Nifty Swap protocol enables the swapping and the exchange of semi-fungible tokens, SFTs, ERC-1155 tokens. ERC-1155 is used in a lot of games. And sometimes people just refer to everything generally as an NFT. But obviously certain Web3 collectibles have more than one copy, so they're not technically non-fungible. This is where the ERC-1155 or semi-fungible token standard comes in. And so we built a marketplace protocol called Nifty Swap Protocol to enable easy exchange of these items. And so we're soon releasing niftyswap.io, which is a marketplace that will allow you to instantly buy and sell SFTs. And you can think of it like Uniswap for semi-fungible tokens, Web3 game items, metaverse collectibles, digital fashion, etc.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. So you started off by wanting to build in the space, and you wanted to tackle these three main problems of content, which is not just audio, video, podcasty stuff, but it's also gameplay and game and fun. That and story and lore and all that. That is content as well. So you tackled that and you built out your own game, and that's Skyweaver. And then as you were building that, then you saw that there were all these other things that you were tackling in the meantime, and then you just basically productized each one. And so you built out like infrastructure and tooling, and that is Sequence. And then you built out the wallet as part of Sequence, I believe. And then there's Nifty Swap, which was, it seems like a trading mechanism and a swapping platform, which now seems to be evolving into a full-blown marketplace focused on the 1150 ERC 1155, and then having some really cool things there. So it seems like you just were tackling this first big problem of how do we make Web3, how do we increase Web3 adoption? And then it seems like you just kind of went down the line of like, these are all the problems. Now let me solve each one. Is that kind of what happened along the way?
That's exactly what happened. And we knew from the beginning that it would be this way. Like, I mean, we didn't know for sure that we were going to build the marketplace and it would spin out as a separate product, but we did know we were going to have to solve for trading of items in Skyweaver. But in terms of like building the Sequence platform, we knew we were going to have to build a developer platform. We didn't know its name. We didn't know all of the components of it, but our team, like at least over half of our founding team's core competency is in building infrastructure, open source technology, and developer tools. So it was very much known since the beginning that we would be doing this. And then, you know, other folks on our team are experts in game and game design. So it was like a perfect harmony.
I love that. So as you've been going along, do you think that the same problems that you've seen or that you saw early on, late 2017, early 2018, are those still the main problems, or have we made any sort of significant headway? And where are we really as far as solving these issues and mainstream adoption?
Yeah, so I think like we spent 4 years before we made any of Sequence available to anyone, a little over 4 years, in fact. And the reason we knew Sequence was ready to share as a developer platform is because Skyweaver as a game had entered open beta and was publicly available. So that meant that our tools were in a place where it's like, okay, well, they can support, you know, what some people have called the best blockchain game. It's like, if they can support Skyweaver, then certainly they'll be able to support other applications and games. So I would say that like the issues that most builders are facing in the space are the same issues that we faced along the way. Just fortunately for them, they don't now need to go build all the solutions because we've already done that for them. And yeah, I mean, like our tools are free to get started with. So it's a really comprehensive platform. And I would say, so some of the issues you asked about, Ben, right? Like obviously onboarding is a huge one, right? Like the wallet, up to date, just they're not going to cut it for onboarding the next billions of users, right? Like it needs to be super seamless and easy. That's what Sequence does. It's like 2-click account creation and boom, you're in the app. And like not in some cheap out way, you know, where we've actually created like this secure multi-chain smart contract non-custodial wallet with like the most rich capabilities imaginable, coupled with this seamless UX. So it's really important to marry those two. Because like, you know, some folks build a custodial wallet solution. We don't think that's the way for Web3 applications generally. So we're very focused on like kind of like maintaining the purity and the integrity of decentralized technology and Web3 like ethos and design. So that's one, right? Like the onboarding to applications, and probably one of the biggest. And then there's also the issue of like, how do you get tokens and NFTs and collectibles like SFTs into your game? You know, how do you mint? How do you index the data, and like how do you query all of the token balances, their value, the metadata, the artwork, the video, right? So we've solved that through our token and NFT APIs, which includes a blockchain indexer for all EVM compatible chains. And then there's also like around transactions, right? So we created a transaction relayer called the Sequence relayer. And this is really cool because it allows developers to enable gasless transactions for their users. Really powerful, right? Because let's say you're playing a game on Polygon and you're brand new to Web3, you don't own any Matic to pay the gas fee to perform a transaction, right? Well, with Sequence, the builder can actually just sponsor that transaction so that the user doesn't ever have to think about it. Really good for onboarding these new folks.
Huge.
Yeah. And then furthermore, for the builders, they can actually batch and parallelize transactions. So they could put like 50,000 transactions together in one bundle, send it all at once. It saves them time, fees, and lowers their carbon footprint. Kind of topical, like today, the merge is happening or in some hours, right? And like really reducing carbon footprint. So like supporting that as well. And then on-ramps. So like there are on-ramps built into Sequence. So like if you as a builder integrate Sequence as the wallet, for example, you automatically are integrating MoonPay, Wire, and Ramp, which are like the three biggest crypto to fiat on-ramps, so that your users can buy crypto with debit or credit. And furthermore, we'll soon release Smart Ramps. It's a product that we co-built with Wire, and this allows users to buy any NFT or SFT directly with credit or debit. So they can skip that step of even needing to acquire, let's say, USDC or Matic or whatever in the first place. And it also significantly increases the success rate of those transactions because, I can save that for later. And then there's like, ensuring that your application, that the nodes are up and running, right? So that like if you've built an application that, let's say it's a game, so that your game's running when your players want to play it. And like if there's a big influx of players, like you want it to be up and going, So we actually built a node gateway service, which aggregates the world's best node providers like Alchemy, Infura, QuickNode, and some of our own internally managed nodes. And it'll auto switch between them in case one goes down or whatever, to essentially ensure like 99.9% uptime, just because you can't really advertise 100% because you don't know what's going to happen, right? And yeah, then like we have the Nifty Swap protocol, which folks can leverage to build their own custom Web3 collectibles marketplace. We'll soon have an SDK for that to make it even easier. And then we have a Unity SDK for anyone building a Unity-powered video game. We have an Unreal Engine SDK for anyone building an Unreal Engine-powered video game. And then we have a mobile SDK for anyone building a mobile application.
That's amazing. There's so many different pieces of the ecosystem that you've built. I'm just wondering, which part are you personally the most excited about or passionate about, or maybe put in another way, what do you think is going to be the biggest driver for the space? Is it the infrastructure side? Is it the wallet, which is kind of like a gateway side? Is it the content, the game side? Because if we're thinking we're only one great project away from crypto hitting mainstream, I don't know if that's true or not. I'd like to believe it is. What kind of project is that going to take?
I don't know a crystal ball, but I think it's going to be a really amazing video game, perhaps built by one of the existing big players, like one of the existing AAA studios, or it could also come from a newcomer, like for sure. But I do think it'll be just an amazing video game that's not like pitching itself as, oh, it's a Web3 game, like come get your NFTs, come get rich or whatever. No, it's not. I don't think it'll be that. It's going to be, this is a really fun game and it happens to be powered by Web3. And then everyone who's playing is like, oh shit, I actually get to own these items. I can trade them. That's super cool. Then I think you'll see all that backlash against, like from some vocal traditional gamers against NFTs, be like, oh no, this is actually really cool and I'm happy it exists. So I think that the infrastructure we're building enables more opportunities for this to happen because it empowers those builders with the infrastructure they need. So it increases the potential for breakthrough content. And at the same time, Skyweaver has an incredible community. It has hundreds of thousands of players worldwide. And the early feedback we've gotten is that it could become the greatest trading card game of all time. And not just like in the Web3 genre, like they're comparing it to like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering. And we have like world champion of Pokemon, like professional Hearthstone, professional Magic players telling us this. I'm not good enough at card games to even like make that kind of claim, even though like I'm biased. I think it's the greatest TCG ever, but like that's what these folks are telling me, and they have way more credibility than I do. And so I think that could be one piece of content that helps bring on the mainstream. But yeah, the infrastructure enables tons of these, like tons and tons of applications to then break through to the mainstream.
That's fantastic. I think you're probably right. It's probably going to take something, an idea that's already as mainstream as a video game, to just be the right type of game in the right way, in the right setting at the right time. And enough people get on board, and then they tell their friends, and it spreads and it spreads. And all these different things come together at once, and that'll be a huge win. And then it'll probably bring the whole space along with it. And it'll be very exciting. I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later. Now, from the perspective of, you're clearly a builder, been building in the space for a long time now. How do you suggest people participate? You know, I talk to a lot of people all the time, and they're either building, or they're trying to invest, or they're trying to network, or they're doing something. And I know that still a lot of people are feeling some sort of FOMO, or they feel like they're not quite making the most of this opportunity, and it's a generational chance to make your mark on the world and be part of something incredible. But how would you suggest, if somebody's new, or they're still feeling FOMO, like they haven't fully embraced it as much as they want to dive in and really make the most of this opportunity?
I'd say, like, I mean, if they're interested, right, then I imagine there are some applications out there that would be interesting for them, like enjoyable for them, right? So I would suggest, like, just dive into those applications as deeply as you can, and dive into those communities, and like become friends with people online. And if they have physical meetups, like go to them, go to, DevCon, or go to like NFT NYC, or go to GDC or Gamescom, these video game events where you now start to see that, like, more of a Web3 and Web2 merging happening there. And like, just immerse yourself in different environments of interest to you. Because, like, my story is exactly that, right? Like, I first became interested in Bitcoin in 2010, but I never worked at a crypto company until like January 2018. It was like 8 years, right, of just being in the space and talking with people. And like, I knew the founders of all of these different protocols that, like, trying to be ETH killers and stuff. And like, I was always, I mean, at the time I was like, maybe, I don't know. But now it's like increasingly clear to me that, like, Ethereum, the ecosystem, that I think that's like the foundation for Web3. But yeah, I'd say just like immerse yourself, really care about it. It's the notion of skin in the game, I think, is a very meaningful one. So if you're just like on the outside and you don't own any crypto, or you don't own any like collectibles or SFTs or NFTs, then I I think your learning will actually be limited, because once you have a financial incentive, then it kind of inspires you to dig a little deeper and be like, well, how can I, like, um, you know, increase the value of this, or how can I contribute to this ecosystem? And so I think if you don't already, like, that's probably one of the early step, like do some research and then just dive in a bit. And then I think, like, you know, FOMO is obviously a human condition that many people experience. What I think is really important, though, is to remain true to your heart and true to your core values. Because even though I didn't start working at a crypto company until, Horizon, which I co-founded, I had many opportunities to work at like crypto startups, and like reading white papers, like so many of them. And to be honest with you, like, most of them didn't truly make sense to me. Like, I would read them and I'd be like, oh, like, everyone's getting excited about this like ICO, and I'm like, but it's just an 8-page piece of paper, and like, I don't actually understand the economic design and how that could be sustainable, or why it's meaningful, or why there needs to be something different than Ethereum when like this is already going on, and then like you could contribute to that ecosystem. So I'd say don't let the FOMO be the driver, right? Like, let your heart be the driver.
I love that. So you mentioned it's becoming increasingly apparent that Ethereum is the foundation of Web3. I have drifted more towards that thesis as well. I'm curious as to what series of events or experiences have accumulated to lead to that belief to the point where, we're on a podcast and you're saying that. So that, it's obviously a pretty strong, or I would imagine a strong belief. How did you get to that belief, and what were those data points that led you to feel that way?
So I'd say it was a combination of magic, serendipity, logic, and brilliant people being around me to inform me this way. Yeah, man, to be honest, I feel as though there's a lot of synchronicity and serendipity in my life that I'm very open and receptive to, and I listen to. At the same time, I do evaluate things with like a logical mind as well to like kind of corroborate my thinking and my perspectives. But just the fact that I met Vitalik a year before Ethereum, and I just got covered in goosebumps the moment that I heard him speak. And like, I did not understand 95% of what he was saying because I'm not a developer, and like, he's so brilliant and like just on a different wavelength than I am in terms of how he can think about these systems. And so I didn't understand 95% of what he was saying. He was, and this was like 8 years ago, he's talking about decentralized governance and smart contracts and decentralized autonomous organizations and like proof of work and proof of stake. And I'm just like, I don't know. But I was still covered in goosebumps. And so I was like, okay, like maybe like, I don't know, feel into this sensation, and, then over time there were lots of different protocols popping up, and like I contributed to some of them. Like I went in their ICOs or whatever, and I considered them because again, I'm not a technologist or like a developer in that sense. So it was hard for me to evaluate like, okay, well, what makes Ethereum so much better, and like maybe this is a good hedge, and like as long as one of these wins out in the ecosystem, that'll make me happy because we will have this like Web3 era. Right. And then when I met Peter, our CEO, like this was kind of, I think like August 2017 or something. And he was so adamant about Ethereum and straight up, like technology wise, he's the smartest person I've ever met, like just insanely brilliant and also incredibly like empathetic and a business builder and like very polymathic, and he he was just so bullish on Ethereum, and he loves open systems and open standards. And he was like, yeah, he's like the only networks I really care about is Ethereum. And I was like, okay, like I trust your opinion on things. So it made me more open to this idea, right? And then over time, and like anecdotally, like when we were doing our seed funding round in June of 2018, a lot of people were pushing back on us building on Ethereum, and Peter was like very strong and like, yeah, you'll see, like you'll see why this is the case. And so like what's been increasingly convincing for me over time is, of course, the developer ecosystem of Ethereum, right? Like it keeps getting stronger and stronger. There are more and more people building into this ecosystem. And I really believe its ethos is pure, and like the people in it from a foundational level and then emanating like circles out are really like, they're pure in their intention in what they want to do. It's never been like this, like, yo, get rich and let's do Ethereum. Whereas some chains have been that. And I think that other way is probably, I don't know, not that sustainable. Whereas like, yeah, the Ethereum ethos is very beautiful. And then when you think of the technology and like the open standards that it's built with and the EVM architecture, right? Like the Ethereum virtual machine. And we now see all of these other networks who have either built on the EVM or are saying that they're going to become EVM compatible. Like every other network says they want to achieve this. Whether or not they can, I'm not sure, because it's certainly not a trivial pursuit to achieve this, right? But you have like obviously Ethereum, but then you have Polygon, and they have their layer 2s, and they're coming out with like their super nets and their layer 3s, right? And then you have Avalanche, and you have Arbitrum, and there's like Arbitrum Nova and Arbitrum Nitro, and then you have Optimism, and then Binance Smart Chain, and like Scale and Celo, and like more and more and more networks, right? And everyone aspiring to be EVM compatible because it brings everything together, right? And then it can enable it all to function like a cohesive ecosystem. So that's why I'm most inspired by Ethereum and the EVM ecosystem.
Yeah, appreciate you going into depth on that. When you're talking about all these different ecosystems, and this is something that I personally struggle with as well, I feel like every day there's a new chain. There's another $800 trillion grant program that's coming out, a bunch of different things. How do you stay up to date on what's going on? Because I feel like there are a couple things that are at play at that point. Obviously, you have your own ecosystem of projects, so you have to stay in the know of what's going on there, and then you're working on it, and that takes time. You goof off and have fun and chat with people like me from time to time. But then there's all this research that has to be done of understanding what's going on, what's coming up, what's legitimate, whether you need to pay attention to that or not. Like, how do you cut through the noise, parse through all this data, and make sure that you're not missing something that's important, but you're also not giving up your time and losing the ability to focus, which, as we know, is a superpower in today's day and age?
Yeah. Yeah. And as probably everyone listening to this knows, there's so much noise in Web3 and it moves so fast. And some of that noise has a very strong signal, and a lot of it is just noise. And I think the way to kind of achieve the right, let's say, knowledge and I don't know what the term, like up to dateness or whatever, is the aggregate of all of the people on your team and your network, and not necessarily trying to understand everything as an individual, because at least for me that would be incredibly overwhelming. And just trusting the different domain experts, like within our organization at Horizon, which is like now 61 people and keeps growing, but then also like everyone who's part of each person's network, right? And we're like very plugged into all the different EVM networks. So we have lots of folks at Polygon and Arbitrum and Optimism, etc. So like really like, yeah, relying on others and having conversations, and also thinking deeply about stuff rather than just changing an opinion because that's kind of like the topic of the day. That it's something I've always been I've always admired about like Peter, our CEO, is that there's so many shifting trends, but he was always like, just like stay focused on this path, and like while being receptive to new ideas. Like we've incorporated so many new ideas, but like only when we really like think through them and we see the value, and then we'll incorporate it rather than just feeling like we need to jump on some hype train. Just because.
So it seems like tapping into masterminds through your network and learning from the smart people in their domain of smartness, for the irony of me making that sense talking about smartness, and then making sure to be open to it, but focusing still on your core thesis, and then letting those things kind of bump up against that and challenge that. And then if it makes sense, incorporating it, but still keeping your eye on the prize and focusing on that initial thing. And then, but being open to new information as presented in the right way through the experts that you have in your network.
Exactly. Yeah. And being okay to miss like a hot tip here and there, because like if it's really like, if the thing's really going to break through, you can probably implement it a month after as well, or 2 months after. It's contextual, but just knowing that like you don't always have to be the first to do everything if you're building something like really special and holistic in the first place.
Absolutely. There's this concept that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is the circle of competence. And I know Warren Buffett's not the biggest proponent of Web3 or crypto or anything, but we can't argue with some of the results that he's gotten so far. And he talks a lot about that. How do you think about the circle of competence from the perspective of developing yours while also paying attention to what naturally yours is, and kind of honing and balancing that nature versus nurture thing?
Yeah. Are you talking about me personally or Horizon as an organization?
I'm sure the organization will inherit what you believe and how you function. So I'm actually interested in you individually.
Okay. So yeah, as an individual, like I'd say my circle of competence is, or like my kind of skills are around narratives and storytelling, and taking esoteric or complex concepts and rendering them into an easily understood format. And so, some of that is reductive, right? And other aspects of it are just about communication. And so, like, I'm not going to go build a Web3 application. I'm not like looking to learn Solidity or learn front end development like React. That's not my role within the organization. It would take me a long, long, long time to catch up to the other people on my team, and they're such masters that like I don't know if I could like until I was like 100 maybe. So just like focusing on that skill set, right? And really welcoming people into this journey, into this story, I think is where my competence exists. And so at the same time, like I need to be aware of how the technology works, at least to some degree, right? Like I'm not going to understand it as deeply as our chief scientist or our architects, but I need to talk with them a lot. And then I need to pull out of it, okay, like what's meaningful to a builder who's building a Web3 game, if they're coming from Web2, let's say. And then what's meaningful to a Web3 builder who's Web3 native, because it's slightly different, right? And then what's meaningful to a gamer or a wallet user or someone who wants to trade collectibles, right? So it's like finding out what those key pieces are and then sharing them with people, testing them, like seeing what sticks, right? Because some things I've said in the past, like I don't think they land, right? And then other things do. And then it's like, okay, double down on the things that do, keep iterating, refine the messaging. Yeah, I think that's a little bit like into the process of how I think, and that ranges from like users to builders to investors to speaking with you, Ben, like on a podcast, because like obviously I want you to be really excited about what we're building because it's in your domain, and so like hopefully it resonates with you. So it's like, yeah, everything's kind of about this iterative approach and like harnessing those competencies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In the beginning, though, when you were thinking about, and I don't know if this was a conscious process or if you just kind of arrived at this conclusion, but knowing that shaping the narrative and distilling the complex into the simple, that is your superpower. How did you get to that point? And the reason why I'm clicking on this button, or I'm double clicking on this, is because I feel like so many people have skills or talents that to just not fully tapping into, but that are one, needed in Web3, and two, can be their edge to participate in Web3, but they're not thinking about quite yet. And I want to try to unlock that for them. And that's kind of why, just to give you a little bit of context on why I'm digging deep into this.
Fantastic question and thought process, man. Because, for me, I for a long time thought about working in Web3. As I mentioned, I didn't come across the right projects, but at the same time, I wasn't entirely sure, like, well, how do I contribute, right? Like, what is it that I can bring to it? And I had some ideas, but I think, growing up, I loved telling stories. I loved writing stories. And so and the only goal I had that stems from my childhood and persisted up until like my 20s was that I wanted to write a book, and then I did that when I was like between the ages of 26 and 28, and like it became a bestseller, and I was, it was a wonderful feeling, and like to do this one thing that I had dreamed of growing up, and I would say like there was a very impactful moment for me when I went to my first Burning Man in 2013, where, I mean, this might sound a bit like egotistical or narcissistic, but like I always thought I had like cool ideas and like philosophies, and that I could have like really cool conversations with people about like existentialism and life, and like, is there a multiverse? Are we real? Like, are there multiple dimensions to reality? And like, I always, yeah, I really wanted to talk about them. And I think prior to Burning Man, like I would kind of go into them a bit, but I wouldn't like fully, like wholeheartedly go into them. And then at my first burn, I would like, that's all I talked about. And like many, many people told me that week, they're like, yo, man, you're a fantastic storyteller. And so I really internalized that. I'm like, yeah, like I've kind of always felt that, but like, thank you for that external validation. And it gave me like a little bit of encouragement to pursue that further. And then I had some ceremonies with the plant medicine known as ayahuasca, and it further like expanded that. And that's what actually like fully put me over the edge to write the book. And it was like, okay, like you're now embodying this storyteller archetype. And yeah, so I'd say that's how I like really tapped into the superpower. And then like it's funny because when I met Peter, our CEO, like I think the clicking moment for him, right? Like I was enthusiastic right off the bat. One of our mutual friends connected us, and like 5 minutes in, I was like, "Yo, like, can I invest in your company?" And he said, "I don't have a company yet. Like, I'm just, or not a Web3. He had a previous company, but he's like, I don't have a Web3 company yet." He's like, "But I really appreciate your enthusiasm." And then we met a couple months later, and like I actually showed him this poem that I wrote about blockchain, and it's like 100 words long, and he read it and he was like, man, he's like, this is so beautiful, and it's like it's exactly the ethos. And he was like, hey, can you write stories for our company? And I was like, yeah, that's perfect. Like, okay, so like chief storyteller, and that's my title now at Horizon.
What an awesome chain of events. That is so cool. And so I was going to ask about the book too. And I think that's unbelievably cool that it's been this passion from when you were a kid and you were writing, telling stories, and now it's all like built up to now this really cool, awesome point. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that experience of writing and publishing the book. And again, not again, I haven't said this before, but the part that I think is probably going to be the most valuable for people is that transition from having the dream to then doing it and living it. And because there's the whole concept of frogs, where if there's a group of frogs, you see one frog jump and all the other frogs will jump because they see the first one jump. Like, let's get the other frogs to jump here. Let's talk ourselves through that.
Yeah. So I tried writing many books throughout my life. And to be honest, I would only ever get like 6 or 7 pages in, maybe 1 page sometimes. And then I would just like kind of feel stuck. And I just knew in my heart, I'm like, this isn't the book. Like you can try to force it, but like, it's not the one that you think is going to be awesome. So like, just, it's okay. Like you just be patient. And then when I had the ayahuasca experiences, which like shattered my previous paradigm of reality and showed me something so far beyond my wildest imagination that now informs my entire way of being, like it communicated to me that you don't need to like invent some fictional tale. Like your life and your own personal experience in and of itself is fascinating enough and is compelling enough and is worthy of a story and is worthy of sharing. And I think all people's journey is worthy of sharing, because we've all had like so many trials and tribulations and celebrations and traumas and whatever, right? Like so much growth we've all experienced. And if you could actually encapsulate that into a story, I think virtually every person's story is worth sharing. And I truly believe that you can learn tremendous amounts of information and intelligence and love from every single being on this planet. So yeah, the ayahuasca experience is really like opened my heart and soul to the awareness that like, yeah, it's all right here. And it also is this magical psychedelic experience of, like interacting with beings of other dimensions. And, anyone who has experience with psychedelic medicines, especially in ceremonial context, may have had like a somewhat similar experience, right? Or can kind of appreciate what I'm speaking of. And the awareness into things that are beyond our immediate perceptual awareness, right? With like the traditional 5 senses that we think about. But yeah, it was like that experience just really opened me up to realize like, hey, like, why not just write about this? And there were no good reasons not to. And to be honest, I wasn't trying to think of any reasons not to either. It was just like so apparent, like write this book, and then I was actually in the Amazon rainforest in Peru, and I had 3 ceremonies with the plant medicine, and I wrote for 8 hours after the first ceremony. Like I slept for like 2 hours, woke up, and what I thought would have been the most challenging thing ever to articulate, because it was so far beyond my previous paradigm of reality, instead of it being challenging, it felt like some celestial waterfall was flowing from the skies into my head, through my heart and arm, and water falling from my pen, words onto the page for 8 consecutive hours. And then I closed the journal I was writing in, and I was like, holy shit, like I got it. Like I wrote that 8 hour experience and like I got it. And then as I shut my book, the electricity on the ceremonial ground shut off for the evening. So like I couldn't have written anymore. And then after the second ceremony, I did the same thing. After the third, I did the same thing. So I'd pretty much written the entire book like while I was in the jungle. And then I came home and I spent 2 weeks kind of contextualizing that story amongst a longer narrative. And then I just went into like an editing process where I had like tons and tons of editors, and it ended up being like a 1.5 year process of like editing and publishing and releasing, etc.
That is so cool. I love that. I love that. It's because think of how few people ever have an experience that powerful where they are freaking tapped in directly to whatever the thing is that you're like meant to do. And you were tapped into that, and it feels like that was for like a 72-hour stretch, and that created that piece of work, and then it went on to become a bestseller. Like, that's absolutely awesome. That's completely awesome. And I really hope that there are people that are listening that tap into that for themselves, because those are the greatest pieces of work and the greatest creations that we as people are going to make. I think this is all an opinion, of course, but when we're really that tapped in and we feel that strongly about it, that's when the best stuff gets created.
Yeah, I agree, man. And like, I think too, like when you tap into that and you create from that place, that it opens you up to always creating from that place, right? Because that was like a 1.5 year process. And then it led into Horizon, which is now this like 5 year process that I feel really tapped into, like it's very deep and like aligned with my soul. And I think that's the place where I think everyone wants to come from, right? And where everyone can come from. And like funny anecdote too, even like, writing that book, like that, and it ended up connecting me to Dmitry Buterin, like Vitalik's dad. He read it and then he reached out to me, and it was like, and I had met Vitalik years prior, and like Vitalik probably doesn't remember me, but like, I'm like, okay, like this is all coming full circle. And yeah, so that's another one of like the little magical pieces of like the Ethereum and Web3 ecosystem.
That is so magical. Very few people have ever met Vitalik. Way fewer have met anybody else from Vitalik's family, I would imagine. Like that is really, really cool. I've literally never met anybody that has met anybody in Vitalik's family besides you. So that's pretty incredible. So I know we're getting kind of close to time here. I want to scope out a bit and talk a little bit about just the metaverse, crypto gaming, the blockchain gaming, the whole space in general. Because again, I want to tackle this FOMO idea. There's a lot of talk of big money's coming in. They're plowing in hundreds of billions of dollars to the space. We as retail are going to get squeezed out. We have no chance. There are these narratives around. And I just wanted to get your perspective on how early are we really? And for those of us who are passionate about the metaverse and want to make their careers and build their life, their life's work in this space, how should we be thinking about timing? Like, how early are we? And is that something we really need to like worry about? Like, do we need to scrounge up as many pennies as we can and throw it all in as quickly as possible to like make sure we don't get left behind? Or how should we be really thinking about all this?
Yeah, so we are very, very early. If you think of something, let's say like the agricultural revolution, which I actually have no idea when it started, right? But imagine if you were 10 years into that, like pretty early, right? And like, imagine, the internet was invented in, I think, 1983. Like, think of 1993 or 1995, right? Like, that was early in the internet, like very early. Like, I didn't even enjoy the internet in 95. I remember being a kid and being like, I don't like this. Like, this is not fun. Fortunately, there were people smarter than me who saw what it was going to achieve, right? And then help build it. And now, like, yeah, Bitcoin was invented in 2008. or 2009. So like 12, 13 years. Ethereum was invented 7, 8 years ago, like very, very early. That said, I think technological innovation, it increases over, like it's exponentially increasing in terms of its rapidity. But it's very early, and I wouldn't worry at all about missing out, because, like, let's be real, like when we imagine the metaverse, for example, right? Like kind of this idea that everyone has, and the different ideas that have in people's heads, but where it's like it's tangible, like it feels real, like you and I feel as though we're in the same room and like having an experience where we could even forget about the physical reality that we entered into the space from. Like being able to exchange goods in there, like that's a little bit of time away. We haven't realized that. Like you and I are having a really cool video chat, and I think it's awesome because I get to know you a bit, even though we haven't met in person, and I'm super grateful for that. And like this experience can be taken to the whole next level, where it could feel like you and I are flying in space, or like dancing, and like have haptic or like physical sensations that could hug one another and could actually make eye contact. Like you and I can't actually make eye contact right now, which is like kind of like a key connecting attribute of humanity. So there's still like there's a lot of things to achieve, and I think it will happen fairly quickly. But like, yeah, I don't think the FOMO is good in the sense that it inspires some action and gets you to like do something. But I don't think I don't think you need to worry about it too much, and like just start getting involved now, because like if this, for example, like if Ethereum is the foundation of Web3, which I believe it is, and if Web3 is the next generation of the internet, which I believe it is, and if everyone's going to be using Web3, which I believe they will, then like, like if you're thinking in terms of applications and experiences, like we've barely gotten started. If you're thinking about value, like scratching the surface, like, yeah, you haven't missed out. It's okay. You're good. You're good.
I love that. And if you think about it, just practically, if you are where you are right now, which you are, there's nothing there's nothing you can do about what happened in the past in this moment. In 10 years from now, either you will have taken action now or not. Do you want to be feeling the FOMO in 10 years, or do you want to have started now? The best time to start was 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. It's like the whole oak tree thing. Best time to plant an oak tree is 10 years ago. Second best time is today. So you might as well at least start now, especially if you're feeling the FOMO, because the only way to get rid of the FOMO is to take massive action and to take the swing and to go out and try, because you never know what'll happen. You never know what'll happen. Anyways, Michael, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been a tremendous amount of fun for me. I'm extremely grateful for you, for all the work you're doing in the space, for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you to everyone listening. It's been an incredibly fun podcast.
Hell yeah. Now, all of the links on Twitter are out there. Everybody can already click through and go have fun and dig into your whole ecosystem. For those who may be listening on audio only or on a different platform where the links may not be as readily accessible, what's the one place they can go to just get everything and be able to dive in and go down the rabbit hole of your extraordinary work?
Go to horizon.io.
Okay. That's easy. And that's HORIZON.io.
Correct.
Perfect. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Michael, thank you again. And I will see all of you on the next